Hey friends, it's Robin. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing another round of recent reads, and we're gonna have a couple of these because I'm behind again. Don't come for me, Heather. I have not been filming. If you follow me over on Instagram, you know that I got sick again. I have a chronic illness, and every now and then it acts up and it takes me out of commission. It takes a while for me to come back from it. And so I haven't had any energy to film, to edit, nothing, which is actually why my final summer ween vlog isn't coming, because I ended up not doing much for the last 3 days of the readathon because I had no energy. I just like laid in bed. So it is what it is. When you have a chronic illness, you just kind of have to roll with the punches and take it day by day, which is why my channel never has a schedule. So let's just get right into it. We're going to start first with the one DNF that I have, and it was Immortal Follies by Alexis Hall. I I talked about this a couple of times, but the fact that I DNF'd 2 Alexis Hall books during Pride Month just absolutely breaks my heart. But I wasn't connecting to this one, and it's unfortunate because everything about this book, like written down on paper, should have been a perfect book for me. It had really quirky writing and it was super atmospheric, it's sapphic, it's all these things that I should have loved, but for whatever reason this just it didn't draw me in. And every single time I thought about picking this book back up, I didn't want to read. I just kept thinking, like, what if I just did something else? What if I just read something else? And I realized, like, if I don't ever want to pick it up, we need to move on. This is Alexis Hall's, as far as I know, this is his first fantasy novel, and it's historical, and we're following this omniscient narrator whose name is Robin, and they are some sort of fantastical being. I don't remember exactly what kind of creature they are, but they are telling the story of this woman who is supposed to be cursed, and she is getting the help from her 2 wacky friends and the Duke of something another, who is actually this woman who supposedly killed her entire family in order to inherit the dukedom and the fortune, and she's supposedly a witch. And they all have to work together to try and figure out who has cursed this other woman. There's a sapphic romance. It is a closed door romance as far as I've heard. For me, it felt like the focus of this book was on the stylistic choices of the omniscient third-party narrator. And so this narrator would be telling you things, and there's all this excess detail because they're doing all of these like little side things and they're getting off track. And it was a really cute style choice, but it left me not connecting to the characters, and it left the plot feeling very slow. And so it never captured my attention. I did try the audiobook and I could not follow the story to save my life via the audiobook. Starting back at the top, I finished Love Theoretically by Ellie Hazelwood. This is Ellie Hazelwood's, third feminist romance? And I loved this one. I gave it 5 stars. I really enjoy Ellie Hazelwood's romances. Here's the thing though, and I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here. This was 5 stars. I thought it was really cute. It has all of the things that you expect in a Ellie Hazelwood romance. I am so sick and tired of watching readers pick up Ellie Hazelwood and then be like, it was exactly like the last 2 books, 1 star. I hated it. Why does she keep writing this book? Guys, you don't have to read this book. They're all the same. We all know Ellie Hazelwood's books, they're all the same, okay? And if you don't want to read it, don't pick it up. But don't pick it up expecting it to be something new, because it's not. It doesn't even advertise itself as something new. All of these covers look the same, the synopses sound the same, they are all marketed the same because these are all the same. So stop picking it up and then being mad and surprised that they're all the same, because that's what they are. Once again, we have this like massive size difference. Our heroine is super teeny tiny, and our hero is grumpy and grouchy and closed off and huge and manly and ripped and all of these things. They're both scientists. They're both super smart. There's a ton of miscommunication. It is everything that you would expect from an Ellie Hazelwood romance, so stop picking them up if that is not your jam. I'm begging you, because every time I go onto social media, regardless of where it is, there is somebody reading this book and then be like, oh, it's just like Ellie Hazelwood's other book. Yeah, it is. They're all the same story. The other thing I want to mention is I always see these books end up on some sort of TikTok or reel of like spicy romances. Lies. It's all lies. I think there's like one sex scene in here, and don't get me wrong, it's good, but it's not a spicy romance. So if you like Ellie Hazelwood's other books, you're gonna like this one. It actually had the other Alexis Hall on here that I DNF'd. It was Pansies. I DNF'd this one at 40%. This, I was warned going into it, but I wasn't expecting it to this extent. There is so much on page homophobia, and I could not fathom reading another word of it. It is brutal. We are following this main character who has so much internalized homophobia, and all he does is criticize himself and beat up himself and talk about the entire gay community in a really terrible way, and then applies it to himself. And I couldn't handle it. It was so brutal. From what I understand, Alexis Hall does a very good job with this premise and like moving throughout the book, like watching this hero grow, but I could not do it. I could not do it. It was too much for me. I'm not ever gonna finish this one. I do think that Alexis Hall has plans to write 2 more books in this series, and I will pick those up because I do like this series. This one wasn't for me. Then I read Berries and Greed by Lily Mayne. I gave this one 3 stars. I got an arc of this and I was so insanely excited for it because one of my favorite things is a submissive hero. I've done a recommendations video for this. I talk about this all the time. I love a submissive hero. I love a soft hero who worships the ground that the heroine walks on, and that's what this one is. I was going to say that's what it advertised as, but that's what it was. But here's the thing. Lily Mayne's books, as time has gone on, have gotten longer and longer and longer, and they don't need to be. They don't need to be this long. This book is like 550 pages, and this book has no plot. Like, I cannot emphasize enough how no plot this book has. You follow this heroine who lives in a cult, and this cult worships these monsters who one day like rose from underground because they lived underground in these tunnels, and now they live amongst humans. And this cult worships them and essentially grooms themselves to become mates to these monsters. And our heroine grew up here because her parents abandoned her and her aunt was part of this cult. She got left there. And so this is all she's ever known. She doesn't believe in any of it, but she's absolutely terrified to go out into the real world. And so she stays. And one day our monster shows up here because he is extremely lonely and he wants a roommate. And so he goes to this cult thinking like, these people really like us. I should be able to find somebody here. And then finds out that it is like this weird sex cult. Him and this heroine end up connecting through a series of events, and she moves in with this monster. And it is quite literally their day-to-day life of her living with him. And then eventually they do fall in love. But this book is going nowhere. There is no end goal. There is no progression in here. There is no like character growth. It is quite literally their day-to-day lives for 550 pages. And it wasn't bad. Like nothing about this book was bad. But like at some point I like got through and I was like, what are we doing here? Like what is the goal? And there is none. There's no goal. It is just these characters living their lives. And like I said, I don't think it was a bad book by any means. And I'm sure there are people who really, really love this, but there just wasn't enough to it to make me care for 550 pages. By the end, I was just like flipping through because I was like, how is this ending? Like, what are we working to? And you're not working to anything. I need Lily Mayne to condense it down though. We don't need 600-page monster romances. I'm here for a good time, not here for a long time. And then I read Just Friends by Saxon James, which is I think this was the second book in the in her Friends, not Just Friends, not Friends. I don't know. It's in this Friends series that Saxon James wrote. And this one was cute. My notes literally say sweet, adorable, but familiar. I gave it 3.5 stars. I literally couldn't tell you the plot of this one. I have no idea. Cute, but apparently super forgettable, and I am not about to grab my laptop. It was something I read and something I apparently have since forgotten. So next, I read The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, which is a book that I've talked about a lot. Because I love this book. I love this book with every fiber of my being. This is an adult romance. I gave it 5 stars. Ashley Poston wrote the Dead Romantics, and when that book was released, I talked about how I think Ashley Poston is doing some really unique things with traditionally published romances, and with this book, it was even more blatant that her premises are just so unique and so cool and so different, and I love that they are being traditionally published. This one I am calling a mix between The Lake House and the Doctor Who season with River Song. That's what this book is. We are following a heroine who ends up taking over her aunt's apartment after her aunt has passed away, and she doesn't want to live in this apartment, but she has nowhere else to go, and the apartment is supposedly magical. She was always told this story that the apartment could send you back in time when you reached a crossroads at your life, and our heroine never really believed it. But one day she returns to her apartment and she is sent 7 years into the past. And when she walks into the apartment, there is a guy in the apartment. And 7 years ago, her and her aunt were actually traveling in Europe. And it turns out that this guy was living in the apartment for the summer. And her and this guy have this beautifully epic romance, but they are split by 7 years, and their timelines are actually backwards to each other, hence the River Song comparison. So she is meeting him for the first time in present day, and he is meeting her for the first time 7 years ago, and she never knows how long she's going to stay in the past or when she's going to get sent back to him. And as they get to know each other, they form this really, really deep connection, and he is helping her find her place again after the loss of her aunt, who was kind of the person that took her out of her shell and pushed her outside her comfort zone. And since then, she has kind of given all of that stuff up, and it is just such a wonderful romance. I loved the play with timelines. I love how her fantastical magical elements aren't explained in any way, they just are a thing that exists. This has a lot of food in it, which was really fun. This has amazing friendships in it. I loved it a lot. I do want to give a content warning though for not only loss of a loved one, but mentions of suicide and depression. And I cannot wait to see what Ashley Poston writes next. Then I read Sanctuary by Rebecca Weatherspoon, which was book 2 in her Beards and Bondage series, and I gave this one 4 stars. I really liked Haven, but I loved this one. This one is following one of the friends of the heroine in book 1, and right at the beginning of the book, she ends up having somebody break into her apartment and tries to harm her, and she needs to get away. She is absolutely terrified after this whole encounter to be in her apartment, to be in the city, and so a coworker of hers is like, I can take you somewhere. And so he ends up taking her to this farm where his brother works and lives, and him and his brother are very estranged. They do not get along at all, and our heroine ends up staying here, and her and the brother end up forming this really wonderful romance. The brother is super quiet and reserved and closed off. They are from totally different worlds. They are totally opposite. She is a, put together city girl, and he is a rough and tumble farmer, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I love the little suspense elements to this series. I loved the bodyguard-esque feel to it because she's staying with him as a layer of protection for herself. I loved the family drama. I loved the farm and the friendships, and I loved this one. I really, really like the series a lot. And then I read Fake Friends by Saxon James. I gave this one 4 stars, and I'm trying to remember which one this is. I think this one was a second chance romance. I gave it 4 stars though, so we're just gonna leave it at that. Then I read Serif by Lily Mayne. I ended up giving this one 5 stars. I will say I like Moth more than this one. And like with Berries and Greed, this series, the books are getting longer and longer. And this one may have been just like a touch too long. Just like a little bit. But I loved these characters so much. This one, we are following Serif, who is a character that we met in, God, I think book 3. I always want to say Lily because of the author, but it's Lilac, who is a character we actually met in book 2, I believe. So we've known these characters for a long time at this point. But Serif was a captured monster, and they have been drugged, and nobody knows anything about this monster or what the drugs are or what they've been doing. And Lilac is determined to save Serif. And the two of them end up having this romance. Serif is trapped outside in a cage, and Lilac is the only one that treats them like anything other than a monster. You slowly learn what Serif is and who they are, and I don't want to spoil anything, but essentially they are going through this massive withdrawal of these drugs. So I do want to give a content warning for that, as well as like military abuse, I guess. Serif was captured by the military and tortured, and this series really does explore the evil side of military. And so this one was very difficult to read at times, but the way that Lilac and Serif support each other, and Lilac's undying devotion to Serif, no matter what they were doing or what they were going through, I loved. I loved how Lilac was ready to stand up to anyone. He didn't care. I loved them so much. I also loved how all of the like past characters ended up coming back together in this one. Like I said, I really liked this one. I loved the characters a lot, but just like a pinch too long. And then the last book I want to talk about is another one of my favorites. It was Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. This is another 5-star book. I think that this is going to be a bit of a polarizing one. I adored this book. However, I can definitely see why this book is not going to work for everyone. This is following these two main characters who both kind of work the wedding scene. Our heroine is a wedding planner and our hero is a florist, and you are getting their chapters in multiple timelines. So our hero's chapters start off in the past and our heroines start off in the present. And when you open up this book, you know that these two have been broken up for about 2 years at this point. And our heroine ends up getting this massive wedding. It's kind of like the wedding of their careers. And they will only work with our hero as their florist. And so our heroine has to see her ex for the first time in 2 years, and they are forced to work together. And you are flashing between her chapters where you can see how strained their relationship is, and the hero who is telling the story of when they first met. And I know that that like dual timeline sort of thing doesn't work for everyone. However, I thought in this book it was done in such an amazing way. You open up from the heroine's point of view, and she is talking about how grumpy and intense our hero is, and you kind of get this negative feeling towards him. And then when you go to the hero's chapters, you are seeing what happened in their relationship the first time through. And as you are getting the story from his point of view, you are coming to sympathize more and more with him and almost side with him more and more. And so your relationship with the characters kind of crosses over time, where at the beginning you kind of are siding with the heroine, and by the end you're kind of siding with the hero. And I thought that was such a cool way to organize this book. And I loved that. This is definitely Grumpy Sunshine. Our heroine is a commitment phobe. She is absolutely 100% against forever. She doesn't believe in true love, essentially. Her mother has been married like 14 times or something ridiculous. And so she doesn't believe in forever. And the hero falls head over heels in love with her and wants her to commit just as much to him. And it is them working through that. Like I said, I can see why people won't like this one. I fell so hard for both of these characters. I just think that they were so much fun. I loved both of their point of views. They were both extremely flawed, and I loved it. The audiobook is also fantastic. I did listen to this on audio from Libro. So that is it for this round of recent reads. Lots of 5-star books, lots of favorites. Unfortunately, 2 Alexis Hall DNFs, which is so tragic. But that is going to be it for this round of recent reads. If you've read any of these, let me know what you thought about them down in the comments, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye.